So without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce our first speaker tonight, Kristin Brogaard, who is the co-founder and COO of Inherent Biosciences. Some of you might remember Kristin from an event we held a few months ago on Epigenomics startups, and she was so kind and agreed to join us again and tell us even more about her company. So thank you so much, Kristin, for being here tonight, and the floor is all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Monica, and thanks to everyone for being here and letting me give this talk. And as Monica mentioned, and it's going to be a little bit of different format, maybe less science heavy this time, and focused on two companies. I think it might be nice and complementary. Two early companies going through a journey of starting a company, both based in fertility, both based around epigenetics. So I'm excited to hear Brad speak, and yeah, look forward to any questions that you guys have, and I'll get going. All right. So, all right, thumbs up, Monica, can you see that? Perfect, awesome. All right, well, thank you everybody. And today I'm going to be talking about building the company that we have right now, really around DNA methylation and infertility. And just as a highlight of where we are as a company, is we were founded almost exactly 2 years ago, in May 2019. We are very, very focused on intellectual property and building a really solid moat and foundation of patents. And we have 2 issued patents, 12 pending, 3 in process, really all around epigenetics as biomarkers. With these, we have a pipeline of 11 potential products, one of which we commercially launched last year and have that live. And our initial target is infertility, and specifically male infertility. And wanted to give you insights to why we chose this as our initial focus. So infertility is a huge problem, 1 in 8 couples. So that's 70 million couples worldwide. And which means if you haven't experienced infertility yourself, you know somebody who has. It's pervasive, and really when you're deciding on your first market, you're looking at something that has a huge issue, and people have a lot of passion around it. And infertility is it's a huge emotional toll. This is a picture of all the syringes in the shape of a heart surrounding a little onesie that this one woman had to take in order to get pregnant. Says hashtag IVF baby. So it's just, I mean, it's, if you've known someone or experienced it, it's horrendous. The emotional toll is huge. There's about 65% dropout rates. And that study was done with people who have insurance coverage. So this is completely dropping out because of the toll it's having on this individual. There's about 3 times more divorces for couples who go through infertility treatment, which is just tragic. And the focus, frustratingly, is almost entirely on the female. So if females go through just this extensive, invasive procedures, and the man provides a semen analysis, a semen and ejaculate in a cup. Like that's all they do. And it's so frustrating. And there's just this big divide in the technology and the research out there for looking at female fertility and male fertility. And this is just like, it's absolutely insane when we know 50% of infertility is due to male factors. There just hasn't been the emphasis in research and in the medical field to understanding the male role. And currently, the current standard of care is looking at a sperm in a microscope. So like, which is, you know, when you're talking to scientists, it blows your mind that our current standard of care for technology for semen analysis and for male infertility is actually just looking into a microscope and counting the number of sperm and looking at how they move. Like that's what they do. That's standard of practice. And it's no surprise that we miss an enormous amount of male infertility in the diagnosis of male infertility. And why this is bad is because if you don't have an upfront diagnosis of male infertility, then the couples, and mainly the woman, is subjected to, it could be years of treatments, hormones. It costs, it's tons of money out of pocket, and none of that would work if there's a male infertility issue. So people are put through unnecessary procedures. The amount of time it takes, and when you're going through infertility care, like, time is not on your side. The amount of time it takes to get to the procedure that could actually work could be up to 2 years, and with $100,000 out of pocket. So it's almost a wide open field, green pastures to improve how we're looking at male infertility. So as a initial market, it's really fascinating because of the huge issue. It's almost like a carnal need. I mean, these people are trying to have babies, and then there is a huge amount of opportunity to improve it. So it's a really wonderful place to focus our initial work. And what we're doing with this essentially is we're taking out, just looking at things at a microscope, which can be useful. If there's no sperm, that's useful to know. But if there is low amount of sperm, or if they move weird, that actually is not predictive of fertility. But what we're doing is looking at the actual molecular biology in the sperm, specifically focusing our initial products on the DNA methylation. So the IP that we're collecting, we have exclusive licenses. We have our own patents, and then we have exclusive licenses out of the University of Utah and Washington State University, where the IP is really focused on germline epigenetics and the prediction of outcomes. So we do have some IP starting to go beyond germline, but we're really creating a nice, when you're developing a company, you think about what you need to really make a fence around your product. So we're making it very defensible that we own this, and creating a moat of IP for that. And I don't need to tell this group why epigenetics is important, but high level is that genetic variation on its own is not enough to make any determinations about fertility. I mean, there are some genetic SNPs that are associated with it, but the prevalence is so small. And then there has been just numerous studies over the last 15 years of people looking at either imprinted genes or specific genes or genome-wide, showing that there's there's epigenetic changes associated with sperm that is fertile or unfertile. And then the fertility itself is complex. And one of the ways to see to modulate the complexity is epigenetics. And what is really fascinating, and this is not my area. I was not a reproductive biologist, so I'm learning, and that's what's great about a startup, is you're just constantly learning about new things. But what is really fascinating about sperm methylation is that the environmental effects, it's really easy for environment to affect sperm DNA methylation, largely because the testes are exposed a lot more to the environment compared to other tissue types. And we know from our research and others that things like weight, diet, exercise, definitely smoking, all affect the DNA methylation patterns of sperm. And we have associations of those DNA methylation patterns altering fertilization rates, embryo development, blastulation, and then also offspring health. And a lot of our IP we're also developing is understanding how we can predict offspring health from father's DNA methylation patterns. So it's really, there's a lot of information here. What's difficult about epigenetics, like we all know, is that it's hard to, they can be modified, and one sperm cell might be different than another sperm cell, and it's not like genetics. So the difficulty of this is getting enough data with the right tools to try to get signal from noise in these sperm cells. So because DNA methylation is so, changes in DNA methylation are associated with so many phenotypes, in our male reproductive health pipeline, we actually have quite a few things in the works. Some funded, some just validation or initial validation from our academic collaborators. But we have our one product, which is the sperm biological age calculator. So it's essentially the somatic age calculator by Horvath, but that doesn't work in germline cells. Germline has completely different methylation patterns compared to somatic. But we've developed the algorithm to do biological age of the sperm and have that as a product. A lot of times clinicians are interested in it. There's been a lot of there have been publications in the last year linking sperm biological age as a better predictor of live birth outcomes, IVF success rates. And also we show that sperm biological age is more predictive of percent motility and concentration. So it's really a better indicator of the actual paternal age, which is a very important factor in having a baby. But it's a better surrogate for that. And so clinicians have been interested when they have some patients who are older, and we have found that some of them have hyperaccelerated aging. And so the next question is, what do we do about it? And we have a IRB study ongoing to see if we can actually alter that and actually decelerate the aging. But for this talk and where our focus is, because focus is very important in a startup, is the male infertility diagnostic. So building up a diagnostic that we can actually tell a man that he is infertile up front. That's more predictive than the semen analysis. So what our proof of concept data, this is from our academic collaborators. The first paper was in 2015. This is kind of what started to spur interest in this, was that they showed a 6-fold increase in predictive power by looking at DNA methylation patterns in sperm compared to semen analysis for predicting infertility. Now, so if you have 20 infertile men shown here, the semen analysis can predict that 3 of them are infertile, where ours is showing that we can predict 17. So it's a huge fold increase in predictive power. So those men who have not been diagnosed, it is likely in those cases that they're going through these procedures that will not work. So our goal is to bring a better diagnosis up front. And we have a clinical validation. We have 3 big studies going on for clinical validation, where our claim is, with an upfront diagnosis of male infertility, we direct couples to the procedure that will work best for them, which right now is IVF with ICSI, which is in vitro fertilization with intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So this is an amazing technique where a single sperm is injected into the egg. And what this does is it bypasses any issues that the sperm might have with fertilization or penetration of the egg or swimming to the egg. So it bypasses a tons of potential, like the biological issues that a sperm could have, and gets it right in there. There is potential that this egg doesn't develop into healthy embryos, and we're finding that there's some patterns to predict that. And right now we have a positive predictive value of 83.3% of being able to predict male infertility. And what's really cool about this is that we have these 3 trials, the 3 studies that we have going are like, they're just like my dream studies. Like, how do you control an infertility? Like, how do you control for the female? That is the biggest thing of, like, the egg has so much biology going on. How do you make sure that your egg is as healthy as possible? And so what we're doing in these 3 studies is we're actually using sperm that have failed egg donor procedures. So we have these just pristine eggs. And as a control, the eggs that had a failed cycle with sperm, we have their controlled match of that were successful in another cycle. So we really can start to control for the female factor, and it's really the best we can do with humans in controlling for that. So I'm really excited for us to start to nail down every level of this fertilization process, because I believe that the DNA methylation patterns that affect fertility I think it's not just like a silver bullet. I think there's variations or chaos or specific biomarkers that are associated with the ability to fertilize, the ability to create good embryos, the ability to implant. I think all of those, it's either increasing severity or a different biomarker, and we have some evidence for this. So it's really an exciting time for this study to come in, because we'll get like just really clean data, which is so important for epigenetics. So the value of this, so why can we sell this product? There's actually huge value. First, potentially, we can be proven wrong, it is much more predictive and as an upfront diagnostic than our current standard of care, which is semen analysis. And physicians and reproductive infertility doctors are very interested in getting a better diagnosis for male infertility. And essentially, semen analysis is almost like a joke, which just caught me by surprise going into this industry, because there's like 30% variation between like technician to technician within the same like embryology lab of counting sperm, because you're doing it manually with a clicker. There's some computerized versions, but right now the standard of care is manual counting, and there's huge variation. So there's a huge need for this. It will save couples time and money. So if for the couples who have to go through the full procedure from start to all the way to ICSI without this diagnosis, it could save them 1.5 years of time. And again, if you've gone through an infertility journey, if you've been shot with those hormones and you know how it affects you, getting it done more quickly, it's better for everybody. I mean, it's a horrible experience. And then money, you're not paying for procedures that aren't going to work. And then physicians. So this is what's really cool about infertility care in the healthcare system. So I've worked in the healthcare system and other startups. It can be frustrating because there are some perverse incentives, and it's not all about patient well-being. You can have something that will get a diagnosis quicker, will improve quality of care, but it does come down to money. And so it's a frustrating experience. But what's wonderful about having a startup working with infertility doctors is that they are completely outcomes based. Their incentives are entirely aligned with the patients, because it's mostly self-pay, so people are doing their own research and they have to publish their outcomes. And it is really common for someone to check multiple doctors. Like they get second opinions. If it hasn't worked after 3 IVFs, they go to another doctor. So that dropout rate of 65% is killer for the revenue of the doctors. So they want better outcomes, and then they want better revenue per treatment cycle. And also it gets them to the procedure that they want the most expensive one, bypassing this middle ground and removing dropout rate. So as a startup, I was hesitant to do another startup working in healthcare, but I have just absolutely loved the physicians. They are much more entrepreneurial. They want to try things because they want to compete with the guy next to them, because people are going back and forth. So it's been a wonderful experience. They're really well educated in actually epigenetics and genetics. So it's a very educated group, where that's not the case with a lot of physicians. So like when you're starting a company, you're looking at what your market is. So 70 million couples could pursue 7 million in the US could pursue testing that are infertile. But right now there's 300,000 fertility treatment cycles going on in the United States, which makes a TAM, so a total achievable market, what's out there, of about 5.9 billion. And then a really selective, like smaller available market that we can actually go to quickly of 250 million. So it's a big industry, and it's growing. And how we're doing this, how we're going to market, which is if you're starting a company, like how are you getting your test into the clinics? How are you bringing it to market? And what's also cool about fertility is that it's a very concentrated market. So there are 450 infertility clinics in the United States, which is not that much. And there's 20 groups. So like there's like kind of like large groups that control multiple clinics, 20 groups that control 40% of those clinics. So it's concentrated, meaning you have to only get in on a few to reach your how much market penetration you need. So again, it's been a good industry to have a company start in. And what we're doing and how we're trying to get into these is building relationships. These big groups are part of our studies. So a lot of the big groups are really invested in what we're doing. They are interested in exclusive deals, and these are just quotes from some big groups that are, like if this exists, like we're buying it, which is wonderful for when you're looking for investments to have a large group of people who are interested in wanting some exclusive deals. So it's all about building that traction and understanding what they want and building a product based on what people want. And that's been almost a year and a half of time, is just talking and talking and talking, understanding what people want, tweaking the product, tweaking the study, getting their feedback, and then having them be part of the process of building this product, which is wonderful for us because now we're building a product with its claims that are most beneficial to these big clinics. Okay, so what was really important when you're starting a company is looking at your competition. And as mentioned before, the standard of care, so our biggest competition is the second row, which is the standard semen analysis. That is what's used. It has very poor predictability, but it is broad. It's used for essentially all couples going through infertility. There are two other companies that are looking molecularly at DNA. One is looking at aneuploidy and one is looking at DNA fragmentation to understand. For DNA fragmentation, it's stability of the sperm. And then with aneuploidy, it's likelihood of how the embryo is formed and how many chromosomes the embryo has. So they work great. They've been out in the market for quite a while and haven't shown to have the predictability that is needed to have a broad use. So they're used in really specific niche instances of recurrent pregnancy loss is the biggest one. So if you keep having recurrent pregnancy loss, they go back and say, okay, is the sperm unstable with DNA fragmentation? So the tests themselves are wonderful. They get it's a great product, but they've really narrowed their market. Where we are really seeking this broad market to have an upfront, broad test for infertility. And we've talked to like maybe 30 to 40 reproductive endocrinologists, which are reproductive doctors, asking about pricing. And they said really anywhere between 5 and 1,000 is probably the right amount of what people pay for that. We're looking at $849 to start for the actual diagnosis. And this product is not live yet, but this is kind of where we're basing a lot of our financial projections on. So the most important thing in the world to a startup is the team. And I just believe that to my very core of my soul. I have a wonderful co-founder, Andy. He is the CEO. I'm the COO. We started this company together. He has MBA. He's done the commercialization of 5 startups and brought 4 of them to exit. And in that, he's done, insurance codes, bringing LDTs to market. He's really had the experience of taking an early idea and bringing it to start to get market traction. So he's been absolutely wonderful. And then I just realized our data scientist we had our first employee hired in November, which is super exciting. He's not on this and I feel bad, but Ryan is just amazing. And it's all about getting someone who fits into the team and who's curious. So when you're looking at startups, I've heard people say it's like 90% team, 10% actual product, because a good team can pivot and change their product to when new circumstances come and hit them. So I'm really proud of our team. We have an amazing set of advisors who have directed us both in the business and scientifically. So it's been a wonderful experience. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. But I wanted to talk about unit economics, which is something you probably don't talk a lot about at this meetup. But really, what you have to do when you're starting a company is you have to make the product scalable and profitable at some point. You don't have to have profit right away, but you have to make it profitable at some point. And methylation is hard to do that with. If you need, depending on what you're looking at, for us, it was hard. And what we ended up doing, a lot of our discovery was on microarrays. And, that's not sustainable for lots of reasons. And for our first product, we've actually transitioned our discovery work to a very targeted enrichment protocol. And now I'll walk through. So that's the direct to consumer testing. That's our sperm age calculator. So we have, we're now in 2021 with a selling price of $199. We've gotten our cost of goods. So essentially what it costs to get the product out to 100. And then we have a goal of getting to a gross margin. So actual real profit. And we're hitting that actually this year. And then where the diagnostic is going to take a little bit longer, but the goal is by 2022, based on volume, is to get to a margin of 77%. So as you're thinking through epigenetics and you're thinking through wanting to start a company, the actual the discovery is amazingly interesting, but getting that discovery to something that can work commercially is really hard and important. So I just want to say that, and that's what I've spent a lot of my time on, is getting these costs to the right levels that we could actually launch this and not lose money on everything we sell, which is not good. So, and then this is an important thing. When you're in a company, you can either just keep the company going, but investors are really interested in how they're going to get their money back. So understanding where your company can fit into different groups is a really good thing to have. So whether we are purchased by a direct-to-consumer group or a lab or a pharma company is all possible. Or, Exact Sciences and Invitae did an IPO, and that's a way to get returns for your investors. So I just wanted to show this as this. We are nowhere near this, but investors like to see this. And it's something that when you're thinking about building a company and you're thinking about getting investors, even early seed money, they want to know that you have your eye on the prize to get them their return on investment. So I will stop there. I want to thank everybody. And I'm excited about what we're doing in the field of fertility, because I think we're going to actually get babies with less pain. And that's really just wonderful. And thank you. And I can take any questions.